When Tasha Rivers walked into Meadowville Karate Dojo, she knew she stood out in her blue gi and yellow belt, but she never imagined what was waiting for her that afternoon. Chad Dwyer and his crew of teenage black belt bullies saw her as an easy target. They mocked her size, blocked her path, and filmed every insult, certain they'd get a viral laugh. But when they pushed too far, Tasha stepped onto the mat. 5 seconds later, the so-called champions were flat on the ground. The bullies believed they were untouchable, but they couldn't have been more wrong. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The dojo smells of sweat and polished wood, a familiar scent that usually brings comfort, but today feels heavy with tension. Late afternoon sun streams through the high windows, casting long shadows across the training mats. Students wrap up their final drills, their movements sharp and practiced. Most wear crisp white gis with black belts tied precisely at their waists, a sea of uniformity that makes Tasha's blue gi and yellow belt stand out like a sore thumb. Tasha keeps her eyes down, focusing on her own space as she performs the ritual bow before stepping off the mat. Her movements are deliberate, respectful, just as her grandfather taught her. The worn canvas of her gear bag beckons from the corner, promising escape from another tense class. "Hey there, mascot!" Chad's voice cuts through the general shuffle of students gathering their things. He stands with perfect posture, his black belt tied with meticulous precision, every inch his father's son. "Leaving so soon?" Brett and Ethan flank him, creating a loose circle around Tasha. Their grins mirror Chad's, all teeth and no warmth. Brett's GI is still pristine despite the workout, while Ethan's shows signs of actual training, dark patches of sweat visible around his collar. "Some of us have homework," Tasha says quietly, trying to step around them. The other students pretend not to notice, hurrying to gather their things and leave. No one wants to get caught in Chad's crosshairs. "But you're missing the best part of class," Brett chimes in, shifting to block her path. "The real training." Tasha feels her heart rate pick up, but keeps her face neutral. Her grandfather's voice echoes in her head. "Stay calm. They're looking for a reaction." Chad steps closer, his voice dropping to a stage whisper. "You know, I've been wondering something. How many marshmallows do you think it took to make you that size?" A few nervous giggles ripple through the remaining students. "Probably enough to fill that GI," Brett adds, earning an approving nod from Chad. "I mean, look at it. It's practically bursting." Tasha notices phones appearing in hands around the dojo, held at careful angles. She recognizes the hungry look in the observers' eyes. They're waiting for a show. "Excuse me," she says firmly, attempting to move past them again. Her grandfather's rule pounds in her head. Walk away twice. This is attempt number 1. Ethan, who's been unusually quiet, shifts uncomfortably, but doesn't break ranks with his friends. "Maybe we should just let her—" "No, no," Chad interrupts, his smile growing sharper. "I've got a better idea. How about a friendly sparring match? You know, show everyone what that yellow belt's worth." "I'm done for today," Tasha responds, trying once more to leave. Walk away twice. Number 2. Brett steps directly in front of her. "What's wrong? Afraid all that extra padding won't protect you?" He reaches out and gives her shoulder a light shove, just enough to make her step back. The remaining students have formed a loose ring now, phones held higher, more obvious in their recording. The fluorescent lights overhead seem to buzz louder in the tense silence. "Come on, big girl," Chad says, his voice carrying across the dojo. "It'll be fun. Great content for TikTok, right?" He holds up his own phone, red recording light blinking. "Unless you're scared." Tasha feels something shift inside her. Not anger, but a calm certainty. Her grandfather's voice comes to her again, clear as day. There's a difference between starting trouble and finishing it. The third shove comes from Brett, harder this time, making her stumble back toward the mat. The sound of her bag hitting the floor seems to echo in the suddenly silent dojo. Tasha straightens up slowly, smoothing her gi with deliberate movements. The mat feels familiar under her bare feet as she steps back onto it. She sees Chad's smile widen, sees Brett and Ethan move to flank her again, sees the phones raised high to capture whatever comes next. "Fine," she says calmly, her voice carrying in the hushed space. She settles into a relaxed stance, hands loose at her sides, nothing like the rigid formations taught in class. Her grandfather's practical lessons flow through her mind. Simple movements, efficient responses, no wasted energy. The late afternoon sun continues to stream through the windows, catching dust motes in its beams as they dance through the air. The smell of sweat and polish remains, but now it's tinged with the electric scent of anticipation. In this moment, Tasha feels her grandfather's presence strongly, remembering his words. "Sometimes, child, respect has to be earned the hard way." The dojo falls into an eerie silence, broken only by the soft shuffling of feet as students form a loose circle around the mat. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the floor, turning the white GIs into golden silhouettes. Phones rise higher, their small recording lights blinking like eager eyes in the dimness. Chad bounces on the balls of his feet, his movements fluid and practiced. His white GI rustles crisply with each motion, his black belt wrapped tight and precise around his waist, a symbol of his supposed mastery. The confident smirk never leaves his face as he circles Tasha, clearly putting on a show for his audience. "Let's see what you've got, Marshmallow," he taunts, voice carrying across the hushed space. Tasha stands perfectly still, her yellow belt hanging loose and unassuming. Her breathing remains steady, her stance relaxed but grounded. Nothing like the rigid forms taught in class. Her grandfather's voice whispers in her mind, "Let them make the first mistake." The tension builds as Chad continues his theatrical circling. A bead of sweat rolls down his temple despite his casual demeanor. The watching students press closer, phones steady, not wanting to miss a moment. Suddenly, Chad launches forward with explosive speed. His leg sweeps out in a wide arc, aiming to take Tasha's feet from under her. A flashy move meant to humiliate. His GI snaps with the motion, and several students gasp at the aggressive attack. But Tasha isn't there. With shocking precision, she steps just beyond his reach. Her movement is minimal, efficient, almost casual. Before Chad can recover, her hand locks around his extended wrist. There's a brief moment where time seems to pause, Chad's eyes widening as he realizes his mistake. Then, physics takes over. Using Chad's own momentum, Tasha pivots. Her hip drops slightly, her grip adjusts, and suddenly, Chad is airborne. The flip is textbook perfect, but with real force behind it. Chad's back hits the mat with a thunderous crack that echoes through the dojo like a gunshot. The collective gasp from the crowd is just as loud. Phones waver as students stumble back, shocked by the violent reversal. Chad lies spread-eagled on the mat, all his arrogance knocked out of him along with his breath. Brett's face contorts with rage. "You little—" he snarls, charging forward with raised fists. His black belt whips behind him as he rushes in, form abandoned in favor of raw aggression. He's bigger than Chad, his muscles straining against his GI, clearly expecting to overwhelm her with pure strength. Tasha shifts her weight slightly, appearing almost bored. As Brett reaches her, she steps into his charge instead of away. Her hip meets his forward momentum, her hands find his GI, And suddenly, Brett's world spins. The hip throw is perfect. Minimal effort, maximum effect. Brett crashes down hard beside Chad, his impact making the mat shudder. The sound of 200 pounds of muscle hitting the floor seems to shake the whole dojo. Students scramble back further, their phones now shaking as they record, whispers rising like a wave. "Did you see that?" She dropped them like nothing. 2 black belts in 10 seconds. Chad pushes himself up on shaky arms, his face as red as a stop sign. His perfectly styled hair is disheveled, his GI askew, and his typical swagger completely gone. Brett groans beside him, making no move to stand. "Ethan!" Chad's voice cracks with humiliation and rage. "Take her down!" Ethan stands frozen at the edge of the mat, his face pale. He looks from his fallen friends to Tasha, who hasn't even broken a sweat. His hands tremble slightly at his sides. The crowd watches with bated breath, phones still recording every moment. The late afternoon sun has dipped lower, casting longer shadows across the scene. The smell of sweat is heavier now, mixed with the sharp tang of fear and uncertainty. Tasha maintains her relaxed stance, watching Ethan with calm eyes. Her grandfather's teachings echo again. The strongest position is one where you don't need to prove anything. Around them, the whispers continue, growing louder with each passing second. She barely moved. How did she? They never saw it coming. Ethan shifts his weight from foot to foot, his black belt suddenly feeling very heavy around his waist. The dojo seems to hold its breath, waiting to see what he'll do. Chad's command hangs in the air, but the evidence of what happens to those who follow his orders lies groaning on the mat. "Ethan!" Chad's voice rises higher, more desperate. "Do it now!" The sound of the air conditioning kicking on makes several students jump. Phones continue to record, capturing every moment of hesitation, every second of this unexpected turn of events. The previously orderly dojo has transformed into a scene of chaos. 2 black belts down, 1 wavering, and a yellow belt standing calmly in the middle of it all. Ethan's face contorts with inner struggle, sweat beading on his forehead. The pressure of Chad's demands and the watching crowd weighs on him like a physical force. His hands clench and unclench at his sides, his black belt suddenly feeling like it's choking him. "I said now!" Chad's voice cracks with desperation and fury. Ethan takes a shaky step forward, then another. His training takes over, body falling into familiar stance patterns, even as his mind screams at him to stop. The crowd presses closer, phones steady, recording his moment of decision. With a visible gulp, Ethan charges. His technique is clean but hesitant. A textbook front kick followed by a practiced punch combination. His GI snaps with each movement, but there's no real conviction behind the attacks. Tasha reads him like an open book. She flows around his kick like water around a rock, her movements smooth and unhurried. As his punches cut through empty air, she steps inside his guard. Her grip finds his GI sleeve and collar, fingers tightening with precise pressure. Time seems to slow. Ethan feels his balance shift, his feet leaving the ground. The dojo ceiling spins above him as Tasha pivots, using his own forward momentum against him. His world tilts, then crashes back into focus as his back slams into the mat. The impact drives the air from his lungs in a harsh whoosh. He lies there, staring up at the fluorescent lights, his GI tangled around him. The throw was clean, controlled, and completely devastating to his ego. 3 black belts, the dojo's pride, Coach Dwyer's star students, lie sprawled across the mat like scattered bowling pins. Their groans mix with the growing murmur of the crowd. Chad pushes himself to his knees, his face a dangerous shade of purple. Brett rolls onto his side, clutching his ribs. Ethan just stays down, something between relief and shame washing over him. The silence breaks. A single clap echoes through the dojo, then another. Soon, scattered applause ripples through the watching students. Someone lets out a whoop of surprise and appreciation. Nervous laughter follows, the kind that comes when something impossible has just happened. Did you see that? 3 black belts. How did she? That was amazing. Tasha stands in the center of it all, her breathing steady and controlled. Her yellow belt sways gently with each breath, the only movement in her otherwise still form. Her face remains calm, showing neither triumph nor anger, just quiet certainty. She cheated. Chad's voice cuts through the growing appreciation like a knife. He scrambles to his feet, gi disheveled and face contorted. That's not real karate. She used some kind of trick. The dojo door slams open with enough force to make everyone jump. Coach Dwyer storms across the mat, his face tight with barely contained rage. His black belt, worn for over 20 years, snaps behind him like an angry tail. "What is going on here?" His voice booms across the space, silencing the whispers and killing the applause. His eyes take in the scene, his son and star students picking themselves up from the mat, the crowd of students with phones still recording, and Tasha standing calmly in the middle of it all. "She attacked us!" Chad points at Tasha, his voice cracking. "We were just practicing, and she went crazy!" Coach Dwyer's face darkens further. He steps right up to Tasha, using his height to loom over her. "This is a complete disrespect to the dojo," he spits out. "These techniques aren't part of our curriculum. Who taught you to fight like this?" Tasha meets his gaze steadily. "My grandfather," she says quietly. "He taught me self-defense." "Self-defense?" Coach Dwyer's laugh is harsh. "This is a martial arts dojo, not some street fighting club. We have rules here, structure, discipline." He turns to the watching students, his voice rising. "This is exactly what we don't do here. This kind of disrespect has consequences." He gestures sharply, and 2 senior students move forward. They grab Tasha's arms, their grips tight enough to wrinkle her blue gi. She doesn't resist as they drag her toward the edge of the mat, but she doesn't lower her eyes either. "This will be handled," Coach Dwyer announces to the silent dojo. "Everyone put your phones away. Now!" His tone leaves no room for argument. "Class dismissed. Chad, Brett, Ethan, my office." Students hurriedly stuff phones into bags, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The excited whispers from moments before have died completely, replaced by a heavy tension. As Tasha is pulled toward the door, some students shoot her quick looks of admiration mixed with concern. Coach Dwyer stands in the center of the mat where Tasha stood moments before, his presence commanding attention. "Let me be clear," he says, voice carrying to every corner of the dojo. "What happened here today was not martial arts. It was not discipline. It was not respect. This behavior will not be tolerated in my dojo." The last rays of afternoon sun slip away as Tasha is escorted out, leaving the dojo in harsh, fluorescent lighting. Her wrinkled gi and swaying yellow belt disappear through the door, but the image of her calm in the face of chaos lingers in everyone's mind. Hours later, as the sun sets completely, an email notification pings on Tasha's phone. The subject line reads, "Notice of immediate suspension. Disciplinary action required." The official school letterhead glows coldly in the darkness of her room, the words blurring together as she reads them over and over. Tasha's phone buzzes again, another notification lighting up her dark bedroom. She hasn't slept much, tossing and turning as messages poured in all night. The sun barely peeks through her curtains, but her trembling fingers already reach for the device. Her stomach churns as she opens TikTok. The video that greets her has thousands of views already. There she is, in her blue G, executing the throws. But something's wrong. The footage starts mid-action, showing only her counterattacks. Chad's taunts, the circling, the shoves, all gone. The comments scroll by like daggers. Who does this yellow belt think she is? Look at her size, LOL. Cheap shots on black belts, Fran, zero respect. Someone needs to teach her a lesson. Tasha's hands shake so hard she nearly drops the phone. More clips appear, each edited the same way. Some zoom in on her face, adding cruel captions. Others slow down her movements, twisting them to look aggressive rather than defensive. A soft knock breaks through her spiral. "Baby girl!" Bernice's voice carries gentle concern. "You up?" "Yeah, Grandma." Tasha's voice cracks. Bernice opens the door, already dressed for the day in her familiar flowered dress. Her eyes take in Tasha's untouched bed, the phone clutched in white-knuckled fingers. Without a word, she sits on the bed and pulls her granddaughter close. "They're lying," Tasha whispers into her grandmother's shoulder. "They cut out everything they did. Now everyone thinks I just attacked them for no reason." Bernice strokes Tasha's hair, her touch steady and sure. "I know, baby. But lies don't stay buried forever." She pulls back, looking Tasha in the eye. "Get dressed. We're going to see Reverend Miller." 30 minutes later, they pull up to the small brick church. The morning sun catches the stained glass windows, throwing rainbow patterns across the steps where Reverend Miller waits. Her tall frame stands straight and dignified, her gray hair perfectly arranged beneath a deep purple hat. "Bernice called ahead," she says, opening her arms to Tasha. "Come on in, child. Let's talk about this properly." The Reverend's office feels safe, with its worn leather chairs and walls lined with books and photos of marches from decades past. Tasha sinks into a chair while Bernice explains the situation. Reverend Miller's face grows darker with each detail. "Show me these videos," she says finally. Tasha hands over her phone, fresh tears threatening as the clips play again. Reverend Miller watches in silence, her finger occasionally tapping the screen to replay certain moments. She says finally. "I see what they did here. Classic technique. Cut out the cause, show only the response. Make the victim look like the aggressor." She hands the phone back. "Your grandfather would have recognized this game immediately." A knock at the office door makes them all turn. A woman stands there, notebook in hand, her press badge catching the light. "Sorry to interrupt," she says. "I'm Darla Perez from the Meadowville Ledger. I was hoping to speak with Tasha Rivers?" Reverend Miller starts to rise, but Bernice touches her arm. "I know your work, Ms. Perez. You covered the factory strike last year. Told it straight, even when pressure came down." Darla steps inside, closing the door quietly. "These videos caught my attention," she says, pulling out her phone. "But something felt off. The angles, the editing, too clean, too coordinated." She looks at Tasha directly. "I think someone's trying very hard to control this story. Question is, why?" Tasha glances at her grandmother, who nods encouragingly. Slowly, she tells Darla everything. The months of taunts, Chad's deliberate provocations, Coach Dwyer's blind eye to his son's behavior. Darla's fingers fly across her notebook. "This fits a pattern," she murmurs. "There have been other incidents at that dojo, other complaints that mysteriously disappeared." She looks up. "Would you be willing to go on record?" Before Tasha can answer, Darla's phone chimes. Her eyes widen as she checks the message. "Hold on," she says, fingers working quickly. "A student just sent me something interesting." She props her phone on the desk, and they all lean in. The video plays. It's from the dojo, but shot from an angle Tasha hasn't seen before. The camera faces a wall of mirrors, and, in their reflection, "There," Darla says, slowing the footage. "Watch the reflections." In the dimmer, reversed image, They can clearly see Chad's initial shove, the way the three boys cornered Tasha. The timestamps match perfectly with her defensive moves. See? Darla's voice is gentle but firm. You didn't start this. They did. And they're working overtime to hide that fact. She taps her notebook thoughtfully. Question is, what else are they hiding? Because this level of coordinated cover-up? This isn't their first time. Tasha stares at the reflection footage, her chest tight with emotion. In the mirror's truth, she sees herself not as an aggressor, but as someone standing her ground, just like Grandpa taught her. Reverend Miller leans forward, her voice carrying the weight of experience. Sometimes, child, the truth needs help to come to light. And sometimes, that help comes from unexpected places. She glances at Darla. What exactly are you proposing? The evening sun casts long shadows through the dojo windows as students file out after class. Chad sits on a wooden bench, wincing as he stretches his bruised muscles. Brett and Ethan hover nearby, their usual swagger replaced by nervous energy. Coach Dwyer paces before them, his footsteps echoing in the nearly empty space. This is unacceptable, Dwyer says, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. 3 black belts, my top students, humiliated by a yellow belt. He stops, fixing each boy with a hard stare. And now it's all over social media. Chad rubs his shoulder, face red with shame. Dad, Quiet, Dwyer snaps. The sharp sound makes Ethan jump. I don't want excuses. I want solutions. He pulls out his phone, scrolling through videos of the incident. This threatens everything we've built here. Our reputation, our relationships with the school board, the funding for our new competition space. Brett shifts uncomfortably. Coach, what do you want us to do? Dwyer's expression softens slightly, becoming calculating. We protect this dojo's reputation. That's what we do. He turns to address the remaining students lingering by the door. Everyone, phones out. Now. Confused faces look back at him as students retrieve their devices. I need all footage from today, for review, safety purposes. His tone leaves no room for argument. Brett, help them delete it after I've saved copies. We need to control what's out there. One younger student raises her hand tentatively. But I already posted. Take it down, Dwyer cuts her off. Now! This is about dojo security, about protecting our community. His eyes narrow. Anyone who doesn't comply won't be welcome back. The students form a line, surrendering their phones one by one. Brett connects each to a laptop, transferring files before deleting the originals. Some look uncomfortable, but no one dares object. Across town, Principal Eldridge sits at her desk, reading Coach Dwyer's carefully worded email. Her fingers drum against the polished wood as she considers his request. The phone rings. It's Officer Redding. I've started gathering statements, Redding says without preamble. Several witnesses saw Rivers initiate the confrontation. Very aggressive behavior. Eldridge nods, though he can't see her. Good. We need this documented properly. Can't have students thinking they can resort to violence whenever they feel slighted. The Dwyer boy's father is influential. Redding continues. School board connections. Donors. Better to handle this quickly and quietly. Agreed. Eldridge opens a new email. I'll draft a notice citing violent disruption. We can't have this kind of disorder in our school. I'll have the witness statements ready by morning. All properly formatted, of course. In another part of town, Chad's mother dials number after number, her manicured nails clicking against her phone screen. Hello, Jessica? Yes, it's Margaret Dwyer. About that awful incident today. No, Chad's fine, just shaken. But we're very concerned about the school's safety. Yes, exactly. Perhaps you could mention it at the next board meeting. Similar conversations play out across Meadowville's more affluent neighborhoods. Parents of the black belt students call in favors, Express concerns about security. Mention words like liability and precedent. The machine moves quickly, efficiently. By nightfall, a narrative emerges. A troubled student attacking respected athletes. A threat to school safety. A problem that needs solving. At home, Tasha sits at her kitchen table, homework spread before her untouched. The house is quiet except for the soft sounds of Grandma Bernice cooking dinner, humming gospel tunes under her breath. The doorbell rings. "Special delivery," calls a voice. "Needs a signature." Bernice wipes her hands on her apron and goes to the door. She returns with a thick envelope, her expression troubled. "It's from the school board, baby." Tasha's hands tremble as she breaks the seal. The paper inside is crisp, official, covered in legal language. But certain phrases jump out like neon signs. Pattern of disruptive behavior. Violent incident witnessed by multiple parties. Disciplinary hearing scheduled for. Possible consequences including expulsion. The words blur as tears fill her eyes. She'd followed Grandpa's rules, walked away twice, only defended herself when they wouldn't stop. But none of that matters now. The system is moving against her, crushing her with its weight. Bernice reads over her shoulder, her hand gripping the back of Tasha's chair. "Lord have mercy," she whispers. "They're going to kick me out," Tasha says, her voice small. "They're making it sound like I'm some kind of monster." The kitchen timer dings, but Bernice ignores it. She pulls out a chair and sits beside her granddaughter, taking the letter with gentle hands. "Your grandfather faced worse than this," she says softly. "And he taught you more than just those moves. He taught you about standing up to bullies, even when those bullies wear suits and carry titles." Tasha stares at the official seal at the top of the page, at the signatures of people who'd never even spoken to her. People who'd already decided she was guilty. The smell of Bernice's cooking fills the kitchen. Familiar, comforting, but even that can't ease the cold knot of fear in her stomach. The notice sits between them on the table, its threats spelled out in cold, bureaucratic language. 3 days until the hearing. 3 days to fight a system that's already decided her fate. The kitchen grows quiet except for the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall. Tasha's yellow belt lies crumpled on the table next to the hearing notice, its color a stark contrast against the white paper. Her shoulders slump as she stares at nothing, the weight of the system's attack pressing down on her. Bernice watches her granddaughter from across the table, recognition flickering in her eyes. She's seen this look before. On her husband Levin's face decades ago, on her own face in harder times. The look of someone good being ground down by something bigger than themselves. "Stay right there, baby," Bernice says, pushing herself up from the table. Her house shoes shuffle against the linoleum as she disappears down the hallway toward her bedroom. Tasha barely nods, lost in her thoughts. The suspension notice seems to mock her from its place on the table. All those official words twisting everything around, making her self-defense sound like some kind of violent rampage. She can almost hear Coach Dwyer's voice reading it, dripping with fake concern about safety and proper conduct. Bernice returns carrying a weathered leather book, its edges soft and worn from years of handling. She sets it carefully on the table, pushing aside the school notice. "Your grandfather had something to say about days like this," she says, her fingers trailing lovingly over the cover. "Grandpa's ledger?" Tasha asks, sitting up straighter. She's seen the book before, but never really looked inside. Levon Rivers had kept it close, writing in it late into the night sometimes. Bernice opens it carefully, revealing pages dense with neat handwriting. "Your grandfather wasn't just teaching you those moves for fun, you know. Everything he did had purpose." She turns a few pages, scanning the familiar words. "Here, listen to this." Tasha leans forward as her grandmother reads, "They got buildings, but we got truth. They got papers, But we got people. Fists win moments. Truth wins battles. Bernice looks up. That was during the factory strike of '82. They tried to fire all the black workers, claimed we were underperforming. Had all kinds of official-looking documents saying so. What happened? Tasha asks, drawn in despite her worry. We organized, gathered evidence, built our case piece by piece. Bernice turns another page, revealing carefully drawn charts and lists of names. Your grandfather knew you couldn't fight power with just muscle. You need strategy, documentation, community. Tasha pulls the ledger closer, studying the neat columns of dates and events. Between the lines of text are little diagrams, layouts of meeting places, arrows showing march routes, notes about which officials could be reasoned with, and which ones were lost causes. See here? Bernice points to a particularly detailed page. This is how we proved the factory was lying about performance numbers. Levon had everyone keep their own records. When management showed their fake reports, we had the truth ready. As Tasha reads, something starts to stir inside her. A feeling different from the helpless anger of before. These pages show something else. Careful planning, patient gathering of facts, the slow but steady work of exposing lies. But Grandma, she says, this is different. They're making it sound like I'm dangerous. Like I just attacked those boys for no reason. Bernice's hand covers hers. Baby, it's never different. It's always the same game. People with power trying to write the story their way. But your grandfather taught me something important. Truth leaves tracks. You just have to know how to find them. Together, they turn more pages. Tasha sees notes about camera angles during protests, lists of witnesses, carefully saved newspaper clippings that contradicted official statements. Her grandfather had documented everything, building case after case against injustice. Look at this, Bernice says, pointing to a diagram. It shows a meeting hall with an X through it, and beside it, a series of smaller circles representing people's homes. When they locked us out of the Union Hall, Levon organized living room meetings all across town. 10 people here, 15 there. By the time they realized what was happening, we had half the town talking about the truth. Tasha runs her fingers over the faded ink. When they close the room, move the room, she reads aloud. The words seem to vibrate with possibility. That's right, Bernice nods. They think they can control this by keeping it all official and behind closed doors. But truth finds its way out. It always does. Tasha looks at her yellow belt with new eyes. It's not just a symbol of rank anymore. It's evidence. Every tug and wrinkle in it tells the story of what really happened. Just like the phones that recorded everything, the students who saw it all, the history of Chad and his friends' behavior. Grandpa knew what he was doing, she says slowly, teaching me those moves. It wasn't just about defending myself, was it? No, baby. Bernice's voice is soft but strong. It was about standing your ground, about being ready when the moment came. But he also knew the fight doesn't end with the fight. That's just where it starts. The kitchen timer dings again, forgotten dinner still waiting in the oven. But neither of them moves. They keep turning pages, Bernice explaining each entry, each strategy, each small victory, won not with fists, but with truth, carefully gathered and powerfully presented. Tasha's finger traces her grandfather's words again. When they close the room, move the room. The hopelessness of before begins to fade, replaced by something steadier. Something that feels like her grandfather's hand on her shoulder, guiding her through a new kind of movement. Not a throw or a block, but the careful orchestration of truth against power. The morning sun cast long shadows across Mrs. Rodriguez's small front yard as Tasha climbed the worn concrete steps. Wind chimes tinkled softly above the door, their gentle sound at odds with the weight of why she was here. She adjusted the strap of her bag, Grandpa's ledger tucked safely inside, and rang the doorbell. Footsteps shuffled inside, and the door opened to reveal Mrs. Rodriguez, still wearing her blue cafeteria uniform from the morning shift. Her eyes were tired but kind as she recognized Tasha. Come in," she said, ushering Tasha through a narrow hallway decorated with family photos. "I've been expecting you since Reverend Miller called." The living room was small but neat, with plastic covers protecting the fabric of an old floral couch. A fan whirred quietly in the corner, stirring the heavy air. Mrs. Rodriguez gestured for Tasha to sit. "Would you like some water?" "I just made fresh lemonade, too." "Lemonade would be nice, thank you," Tasha replied, pulling out her grandfather's ledger and a notebook. She could hear ice cubes clinking in the kitchen. Mrs. Rodriguez returned with 2 tall glasses, condensation already beading on the sides. She settled into a worn armchair across from Tasha, smoothing her uniform skirt with nervous hands. "I should have spoken up sooner," she said quietly, more to herself than to Tasha. "Those boys, it wasn't just you they targeted." Tasha took a sip of lemonade, letting the tart sweetness steady her. "Can you tell me what you saw? Everything you remember?" Mrs. Rodriguez's story spilled out like water from a broken dam. Chad and his friends had been terrorizing younger students in the lunch line for months, cutting in front, knocking trays, making comments about people's food or appearance. "They always made it look like jokes," she said, twisting a tissue in her hands. "But you could see the hurt in those kids' faces." "Did you report it?" Tasha asked, pen moving steadily across her notebook page. 3 times. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice hardened. First to Principal Eldridge, then to the school board. Last time directly to Coach Dwyer, since everyone kept saying what good boys they were, how he'd straighten them out. She gave a bitter laugh. Next day, my hours got cut. "Budget reasons," they said. A knock at the door made them both jump. It was Mr. Chen, the night janitor, still in his gray work clothes despite the weekend. Mrs. Rodriguez had called him too. "I saw everything," he said without preamble, settling onto the couch next to Tasha. "Those boys would wait until the hallways were almost empty. I cleaned up more knocked-down books than I can count." Tasha's pen flew across the pages as Mr. Chen described incident after incident. The time Chad trapped a freshman in the bathroom. The day Brett made a girl cry by mocking her lunch. Ethan usually just watched, but he never stopped them. "I wrote it all down," Mr. Chen said, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. "Dates, times, what happened. Been doing it for months. Showed it to Officer Redding once." He shook his head. He said without video proof, it was just stories. Mrs. Rodriguez brought more lemonade as they talked. The morning stretched toward noon, the fans' steady rhythm underlying their voices as they pieced together a pattern of harassment and cover-ups. Around 11, Reverend Miller arrived, her presence filling the small room with quiet authority. She listened intently, occasionally asking a clarifying question or making a note in her own notebook. "The fellowship hall is yours if you need it," she told Tasha. "We can hold a teach-in, let people share their stories, show everyone this isn't just one incident." Just then, Darla Perez's car pulled up outside. The reporter entered with an armful of papers, her face flushed with excitement and anger. "You're not going to believe what I found," she said, spreading documents across Mrs. Rodriguez's coffee table. "Financial records. The school's been paying Dwyer's dojo for safety training programs, $50,000 last year alone. But there's no record of any actual programs." They all leaned in to look. Purchase orders, contracts, board meeting minutes, all showing money flowing between the school and the dojo. "And look at the dates," Darla pointed out. Each payment lines up with when complaints about the boys were filed. It's like hush money, but they dressed it up as community partnership. Tasha sat back, her head spinning. The ledger in her lap seemed heavier now, weighted with echoes of her grandfather's fights against similar systems. Principal Eldridge signs off on all these payments, Darla continued. And guess who sits on the committee that reviews her contract? Coach Dwyer's brother-in-law. Mrs. Rodriguez muttered something in Spanish that sounded like a curse. Mr. Chen's face had gone hard and still. Reverend Miller placed a steady hand on Tasha's shoulder. Child, you did more than just defend yourself that day. You cracked open their whole operation. Darla gathered her papers, stacking them precisely. This isn't just about you anymore, Tasha. This is their system. How they protect their own. How they silence anyone who speaks up. She met Tasha's eyes. But systems leave paper trails, and we've got the receipts. The fan continued its slow rotation, stirring the heavy air. Outside, a car horn honked. Kids shouted. Normal Saturday sounds that seemed far away from the weight of truth gathering in Mrs. Rodriguez's small living room. Tasha looked down at her notebook. Pages now full of testimony, dates, details. Each entry was a crack in the wall they'd built around their power. Monday morning dawned gray and cold. Tasha sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone as notifications flooded in. The district-wide email from Principal Eldridge appeared first, its subject line stark against the white screen. Addressing violence in our school community. Her hands trembled as she read, Dear parents and students, recent events have highlighted a disturbing trend of violent behavior in our halls. We take these incidents seriously and are implementing strict measures to protect our student body. Aggressive actions will result in immediate disciplinary response. Tasha's stomach clenched. Though the letter didn't name her directly, everyone would know who it meant. The careful wording painted a picture of danger that needed to be controlled, of threats that needed containing. Her phone buzzed again. A video link appeared in her messages, sent by an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she tapped it. The footage started mid-action. There she was, but the sequence was all wrong. They'd cut out Chad's shoves, Brett's taunts. Instead, it showed her stepping onto the mat first, looking angry. The audio was altered too, words she'd never said dubbed over her calm silence. Worst of all, they'd spliced in clips of someone else, a different girl, in a similar GI, throwing wild punches at a tournament last year. Grandma, she called out, her voice cracking. They changed it. They made it look like... Bernice hurried over from the stove, reading over Tasha's shoulder as comments poured in under the video. Always knew she was dangerous. No control. They should have kicked her out years ago. Bernice's hand tightened on Tasha's shoulder. Save it all, she said firmly. Every comment, every share. Darla needs to see what they're doing. The school hallways felt colder than usual that morning. Students whispered as Tasha passed, some pulling away like she might explode at any moment. The doctored video had spread fast, reshared by anonymous accounts, and picked up by local chat groups. In first period, her phone vibrated with an official email. The Juvenile Affairs Office copied her on a complaint filed by Officer Redding. Words jumped out at her. Pattern of aggressive behavior. Risk to student safety. Mandatory anger management evaluation. Her vision blurred. They were building a paper trail, each document carefully worded to paint her as unstable. Dangerous. The girl who needed controlling. During lunch, she sat alone in the library, watching the view count climb on the edited video. New versions appeared hourly, each one cutting the footage differently, adding sinister music or slow motion to make her defensive moves look vicious. The whispers followed her through afternoon classes. I heard she attacked them for no reason. My mom says she's got a record. Coach Dwyer's going to press charges. Each rumor built on the last, growing wilder, darker. By final period, she overheard someone claim she'd put 3 students in the hospital before coming to this school. The truth was, drowning in their carefully crafted fiction. The walk home felt endless. Cars slowed as they passed her, parents staring with mixture of fear and judgment. A group of middle school kids crossed the street when they saw her coming, one boy pointing and whispering to his friends. At dinner, Tasha pushed her food around her plate, the smell of Grandma's cooking unable to break through her nausea. The silence in their small kitchen felt heavy, broken only by the soft clink of forks and the distant sound of traffic. "They're erasing me," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're erasing me before I can even breathe." Bernice set down her fork. "Baby girl, look at me." Tasha raised her eyes slowly, meeting her grandmother's steady gaze. "They're trying," Bernice acknowledged. "They're using every trick they know. Fear, lies, paperwork, making you small before you can stand tall." She reached across the table, taking Tasha's hand. "But they forgot something important." "What's that?" "You've got your grandfather's spine and my memory. We know these moves. Been watching them try this dance for generations." Bernice squeezed her hand. "And you know what else?" Tasha shook her head. "Every lie they tell, every video they doctor, every false report they file, that's not just meanness. That's fear. They're scared of the truth you carry." Outside, a car alarm started wailing, its piercing sound cutting through the evening quiet. Tasha stared at her untouched dinner, thinking about the weight of truth versus the volume of lies. The machine was big, with countless moving parts all grinding away at her story, her character, her very self. But Grandma was right. They were scared. Why else go to such lengths? Why build such elaborate fictions if one girl's truth wasn't threatening enough to shake their whole system? The car alarm finally fell silent, leaving behind a ringing emptiness. In that quiet, Tasha remembered her grandfather's words from the ledger. "They can paper over the truth, but they can't make it disappear. Truth's got roots, goes deep. Just got to protect those roots until it's strong enough to break through." She picked up her fork, taking a small bite of dinner. The food still tasted like ash in her mouth, but she forced herself to eat. Tomorrow would require strength, and Grandma's cooking had sustained generations of fighters before her. The machine might be erasing her public image, but they couldn't erase the truth she carried. In her muscles, in her memory, in the growing stack of evidence hidden safely in her grandfather's ledger. That truth had roots, and they ran deep. The knock came just after 9, 3 sharp raps that made Tasha and Bernice exchange worried glances. They weren't expecting anyone this late. Bernice peered through the peephole, then stepped back with surprise. "It's that boy from the dojo! The quiet one!" Tasha's heart skipped. "Ethan?" She opened the door to find him shifting from foot to foot on their small porch, his face half hidden by the shadows. He wore a plain hoodie instead of his usual dojo gear, and his eyes darted nervously to the street behind him. Can I come in?" His voice cracked. "Please?" Bernice ushered him inside, closing the door firmly. In the warm kitchen light, Ethan looked pale and drawn, like he hadn't slept properly in days. His hands wouldn't stop fidgeting with the strings of his hoodie. "I'm sorry," he blurted out before anyone could speak. "I'm so sorry about everything. The fight, the videos, all of it. It wasn't supposed to go like this." Tasha sat down at the kitchen table, keeping her movements slow and careful, like approaching a spooked animal. "What wasn't supposed to go like this, Ethan?" He swallowed hard. "Chad, he planned it all. That day at the dojo, it wasn't spontaneous. He'd been talking about it for weeks, saying we needed to put on a show with the yellow belt. His voice grew smaller. With you. Bernice's wooden chair creaked as she settled in. Tell us everything, child. Ethan's words tumbled out in a rush. Chad kept saying we needed content for social media, something viral. Ethan's face flushed with shame. He said you'd be perfect because no one would believe your side anyway. He made us practice the setup, told us exactly what to say, where to stand so the phones would catch everything. Tasha's hands clenched under the table. And Coach Dwyer? His dad knew. Not everything, but enough. He told Chad that sometimes you have to test people's boundaries to maintain discipline. Ethan's laugh was hollow. That's what he called it. Testing boundaries. Bernice stood suddenly. Wait right here. She disappeared into the living room, returning with her phone and Darla's business card. This needs to be on record. 10 minutes later, Darla arrived, her reporter's notebook already in hand. She set up her phone to record while Ethan spoke, his voice growing steadier as he shared details. Screenshots of group chats where Chad laid out the plan. Timestamps of when Coach Dwyer suggested which students to target for discipline lessons. Screen recordings of conversations about editing footage to tell the right story. I saved everything, Ethan said, pulling out his own phone. Chad thinks I deleted it all like he told us to, but he opened a hidden folder, revealing dozens of files. I couldn't. It wasn't right. Darla leaned forward. You understand what sharing this means? There could be consequences. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he transferred the files. I know. Chad's already threatening people who speak up. Yesterday, he cornered Jamie from the junior class just for saying the video looked edited. Are you sure about this? Tasha asked softly. They'll come after you. They're already coming after you, he replied, and you didn't do anything wrong. I did. I helped them set you up because I was scared of losing my spot, my belt, He trailed off, staring at his hands. But I'm more scared of what happens if nobody stops them. Darla finished copying the files, her face grim as she reviewed them. This is exactly what we needed. Clear evidence of premeditation, tampering, intimidation. She looked at Ethan. Would you be willing to make a formal statement? He nodded, though his face had gone slightly green. Just, can you wait to publish? Give me time to tell my parents first? They should hear it from me, not social media. Of course, Darla assured him. We'll do this right. They spent the next hour recording Ethan's official statement. He walked them through each piece of evidence, explaining contexts, identifying voices in recordings, confirming dates and times. His voice grew stronger with each revelation, like each truth freed something inside him. Finally, well past 11, Ethan stood to leave. He paused at the door, looking back at Tasha. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I really am sorry. For all of it. Tasha nodded, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not as one of Chad's followers, but as another kid trapped in the machine's gears. Thank you for coming forward. After he left, Darla reviewed her notes one last time. This changes everything. We can prove systematic targeting, prove the cover-up, prove the retaliation. She gathered her things, energy radiating from her movements. I'll start verifying everything tonight. Once Darla had gone, Tasha sat at the kitchen table, her grandfather's ledger open before her. The pages felt warm under her fingers, like they held some of his strength still. She traced his careful handwriting. Truth needs witnesses. Find the ones who see, but stay silent. Help them find their voice. Bernice's hand settled on her shoulder. You okay, baby? Tasha stared at the ledger, thinking of Ethan's shaking hands and determined eyes, of all the evidence now safely backed up on Darla's phone. She thought of the machine grinding away, trying to bury her story under manufactured lies and doctored videos. "Now we fight their lies," she whispered, and her voice held no fear. The old wooden floorboards of First Community Church creaked under the weight of folding chairs and restless bodies. The usual Sunday morning peace had given way to an electric tension as neighbors filed in, filling row after row until people stood along the walls. Window fans hummed, fighting the heat of too many bodies in too small a space. Tasha sat in the front row between Bernice and Reverend Miller, watching Darla set up her laptop and portable projector. Her yellow belt lay folded in her lap, a reminder of why they were here. Behind her, she could hear whispers rippling through the crowd. "Did you see those videos they've been sharing? My daughter said the school's calling it a rampage. Coach Dwyer's saying she attacked without warning." Reverend Miller stood, her presence commanding immediate silence. "Brothers and sisters," her voice carried to every corner, "we're here today because truth matters, because justice matters, because our children matter." She gestured to Darla. "Ms. Perez has something to show us." Darla stepped forward, professional in her pressed blazer despite the heat. "What you're about to see is a synchronized compilation of 3 different video sources from the dojo that day. The timestamp in the corner proves these are unedited. The projector flickered to life against the church's white wall. The footage started with a wide shot from a security camera showing Tasha trying to leave practice. In perfect sync, a student's phone recording showed Chad and his friends circling her. A third angle, caught in a mirror's reflection, captured Chad's deliberate shove. Someone in the crowd gasped as the push played out in crystal clarity. The synchronized videos continued, showing Tasha's precise, minimal movements. No flashy kicks, no aggressive strikes, just clean, defensive techniques that ended the confrontation in seconds. The audio picked up Chad's taunts before, his cursing after. "Now," Darla said, freezing the frame, "compare this to the edited version being circulated." She played the doctored clip that had been spreading online, the one that started mid-action and made Tasha look like the aggressor. Angry murmurs filled the church. Mrs. Washington, who'd taught 3rd grade for 30 years, stood up. "They cut out everything that showed those boys starting it." "Exactly," Darla confirmed. "And we have evidence this wasn't just casual editing." She pulled up screenshots of Chad's group chats, the ones Ethan had provided. These messages show the setup was planned. They intended to provoke and film a reaction. The crowd grew louder, their anger palpable. Reverend Miller raised her hands for quiet. "Tasha," she said gently, "would you like to speak?" Tasha's legs felt wooden as she stood, facing her community. These were people who'd known her since she was small, who'd watched her grow up, who'd mourned with her family when Grandpa passed. She gripped her yellow belt like an anchor. "I didn't want to fight," she began, her voice soft but steady. "My grandfather taught me that real strength isn't about showing off or hurting people. It's about ending danger, nothing more." She looked down at her belt. "That day, I walked away twice, just like he taught me. But when they wouldn't stop," she raised her eyes to the crowd, "I didn't fight for pride. I fought to end danger." "Amen," called out Mr. Jenkins from the back. Others nodded, some wiping tears. Darla stepped forward again. "There's more. We've uncovered financial records showing suspicious payments between the school board and Coach Dwyer's dojo. Previous complaints about bullying were buried. Students were pressured to delete evidence." Her words cut off as Reverend Miller's phone buzzed. The Reverend's face darkened as she read the message. She held up a hand, and the room fell silent. "The school board," she announced, her voice tight with controlled anger, "has just decided to make Tasha's disciplinary hearing closed to the public. No community members allowed." The church erupted. Parents jumped to their feet, voices overlapping in outrage. Ms. Peterson, the cafeteria worker who'd testified about previous bullying, shouted, "They can't hide this!" "They're trying to bury it," called another voice. "Not this time." That was Mrs. Washington again, standing tall despite her 70 years. "We didn't march in the 60s to let them pull these tricks now." Bernice gripped Tasha's hand as the crowd's anger swelled. Tasha squeezed back, watching Reverend Miller's face harden into stone. The Reverend stood motionless, reading the text message again, her jaw set in a way that spoke of battles long fought and the determination to fight another. The afternoon light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow shadows across the agitated crowd. Church fans fluttered like nervous birds, and the old wooden floors groaned beneath shifting feet. In the midst of the chaos, Tasha felt strangely calm. She looked down at her grandfather's belt in her lap, remembering his words about moving the room when they tried to close it. Around her, the community's voices rose and fell like waves, angry, protective, determined. These were the witnesses her grandfather had written about in his ledger. These were the voices that refused to stay silent. Reverend Miller's phone buzzed again in her tight grip, but she didn't look at it. Her eyes remained fixed on some distant point, her expression carved from granite, while the afternoon light painted her collar with strips of red and gold. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the church windows as Tasha helped fold chairs. Her arms ached, but the physical work felt good, a way to process everything that had happened during the forum. The smell of old wood and lemon polish filled her nose as she stacked each metal chair with a soft clang. Mrs. Washington insisted on helping despite her age, her arthritic hands gripping chair after chair. "You showed real dignity today, child," she said, pausing to catch her breath. "Your grandfather would be proud." Tasha managed a small smile, remembering how Grandpa Levon used to say dignity wasn't about winning. It was about standing firm in your truth. The thought warmed her as she worked, despite the uncertainty ahead. Bernice and Reverend Miller stood near the pulpit, heads bent over papers, probably planning their next move now that the board had closed the hearing. Darla had left to file her story, promising to keep digging into the financial connections she'd uncovered. The piece of cleanup duty shattered as sirens pierced the air. At first, they seemed distant, but they grew louder with each passing second. Red lights flashed through the stained glass, painting emergency patterns across the walls. "Fire!" someone shouted from outside. "The fellowship hall's on fire!" The room erupted into motion. Reverend Miller ran for the side door, her robes billowing. Tasha dropped the chair she was holding and followed the crowd streaming outside. The fellowship hall, the simple building where they held community dinners and youth groups, was engulfed in flames. Orange tongues licked up the white siding, black smoke billowing against the darkening sky. The heat hit Tasha's face like a physical wall. "Dear Lord," Mrs. Washington whispered, clutching her chest. Fire trucks screamed into the parking lot, their red lights spinning across shocked faces. Firefighters jumped out, dragging hoses, shouting orders. The crowd moved back as water arced through the air, steam hissing where it met flames. Tasha found herself pressed against Bernice's side, watching helplessly as the place where she'd attended so many community gatherings burned. The fellowship hall had been where they'd held Grandpa's memorial service, where she'd learned to draw in summer art classes, where just last week they'd planned this very forum. Hours later, when the flames were finally out, the fire chief spoke to Reverend Miller. His words carried across the parking lot. "Looks electrical. Old wiring, probably." But Tasha saw the look that passed between Reverend Miller and Bernice. The same look flickered across other faces in the crowd. No one said it out loud, but the timing was too convenient. The message too clear. The next morning, Tasha checked her email before school, hoping for news about her art scholarship application. The response made her stomach drop. "Dear Ms. Rivers, Your application has been deferred pending behavioral review. Recent incidents have raised concerns. She closed the laptop, hands shaking. They were cutting off every path forward, one by one. At school, the hallways felt different. Students who'd been friendly yesterday now avoided her eyes. Teachers spoke to her in careful, distant tones. During lunch, she overheard a freshman telling his friend, "My dad says we shouldn't get involved. It's not worth the trouble." The fear spread like ripples in a pond. The cafeteria worker who'd testified about previous bullying called in sick. The janitor who'd shared his documentation suddenly couldn't remember specific dates. Even some church members found excuses not to return Bernice's calls. That evening, Tasha sat at their kitchen table staring at her yellow belt. The edges were fraying slightly. Like her hope, she thought. The smell of smoke still clung to her clothes from the fire, mixing with the familiar scent of Bernice's cooking. "They're winning," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Everyone's too scared now." Bernice turned from the stove, wooden spoon in hand. "Baby girl, the scholarship committee won't even look at my portfolio anymore." Tasha's words tumbled out faster. "Nobody will talk to me at school. They burned down the fellowship hall just to show they could, and everyone knows it, but nobody can prove it, and—" Her voice broke completely. Tears she'd been holding back all day spilled over. Bernice crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, wrapping strong arms around her granddaughter. Tasha buried her face in her grandmother's shoulder, sobbing like she hadn't since she was small. "They closed every door," she choked out. "The hearing, the scholarship, the fellowship hall. They're making sure we can't fight back." Bernice's hand stroked her hair, steady and sure. For a long moment, she just held Tasha, letting her cry. The kitchen clock ticked softly, marking time as the last sunlight faded outside their windows. Finally, Bernice spoke, her voice low and firm against Tasha's ear. "They closed the room," she whispered. "Now, move the room." Tasha hiccuped, her grandfather's words echoing in her grandmother's voice. She pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "What?" "Your grandfather didn't just write those words," Bernice said. "He lived them. When they locked the courthouse doors, he held court on the courthouse steps. When they closed the meeting halls, he moved the meetings to porches and parks." She cupped Tasha's tear-stained face in her hands. "They think walls and doors give them power. But truth doesn't need walls, baby girl. Truth just needs voices." The kitchen was quiet except for the gentle bubbling of whatever was cooking on the stove. Through the window, Tasha could see the first stars appearing in the purple evening sky. Her tears slowed as she leaned into her grandmother's strength, feeling the weight of generations who'd faced down fear before her. The kitchen felt different in the early morning light. Steam rose from coffee cups as Tasha sat with Bernice at their worn wooden table. Grandpa Levon's ledger lay open between them, its pages yellow with age, but filled with clear, determined handwriting. Reverend Miller arrived first, carrying a box of still-warm donuts. Darla followed minutes later, her reporter's notebook already in hand. Mr. Washington, who'd served in Vietnam with Grandpa Levon, eased into a chair while his wife poured him coffee. Other faces Tasha knew from church filtered in. Mrs. Chen, who taught Tai Chi in the park. Mr. Rodriguez, who'd organized union meetings for 30 years. "The board thinks they won by closing that hearing," Bernice said, her finger tracing Levon's neat script. "But my husband knew something they forgot. Public space belongs to the public." Tasha nodded slowly, remembering how the videos of her takedowns had spread. "They can control what happens inside their buildings," she said. "But they can't control what people see in the open." "Exactly." Darla spread documents across the table. Permit applications, press contacts, legal codes. "The town green is designated public space. First Amendment protected. They can't stop us from gathering there." Mr. Washington leaned forward, his military bearing still evident despite his age. "We veterans could demonstrate alongside you, show how self-defense is about protection, not aggression. Just like your grandfather taught. And I can teach proper falling techniques," Mrs. Chen added. "Show how what you did was about safety, not harm." The plan took shape over coffee and donuts. Reverend Miller would handle the permits. Mr. Rodriguez knew union folks who could bring portable speakers and help set up. Mrs. Washington had connections with the senior center. Dozens of elderly residents who'd witnessed years of the dojo's privileged treatment. "We do it all at once," Darla said, making notes. "The demonstration draws attention while we release everything we've gathered. The financial records showing Dwyer's deals with the school, the testimony about previous incidents, Ethan's videos showing the full context. And this." Reverend Miller pulled out legal papers, a formal Title VI civil rights complaint. The ACLU helped draft it. Discrimination, retaliation, pattern of bias. "We file it the same hour. Copy to the State Attorney General." Tasha studied the complaint. Her name was at the top, but below it were others. The cafeteria worker who'd been silenced, students who'd faced similar treatment, parents who'd tried to report bullying. She wasn't alone anymore. "They'll try to stop us," she said quietly. "Let them try." Bernice's voice held steel. "Your grandfather taught me. When they build walls, we build bridges. When they close doors, we open windows. When they hide truth in back rooms, we bring it to the town square." The planning continued as morning stretched toward noon. Mrs. Chen drew a diagram of the green, marking spots for demonstrations. Mr. Rodriguez calculated how many chairs they'd need for elderly supporters. Darla built a timeline for releasing information to multiple news outlets simultaneously. "We'll need security," Mr. Washington said. "Not everyone will like this." "Already handled," Reverend Miller replied. "I spoke with Sergeant Martinez. She's not happy about how Officer Redding handled things. She'll have community officers present, ones who understand the difference between keeping peace and taking sides." Tasha absorbed it all, watching these adults, these pillars of her community, build something larger than any single incident. This wasn't just about her fight in the dojo anymore. It was about every student who'd been bullied, every parent who'd been dismissed, every truth that had been buried under paperwork and procedure. "What about the boys?" she asked suddenly. "Chad? Brett? Ethan?" "They'll have a choice to make," Darla said. "Ethan's already chosen truth. The others, well, sometimes seeing justice happen in the open changes people." The sun climbed higher as they finalized details. Permits would be filed that afternoon. The press packet would go out to 12 different outlets. Veterans and seniors would spread the word through their networks. Even the fire, meant to frighten them, had only made their resolve stronger. Finally, as people began gathering their things, Tasha slipped upstairs to her room. Her blue G hung clean in the closet, her yellow belt coiled on the shelf below. She lifted the belt, feeling its familiar weight. Not white for beginner, not black for expert. Yellow, the color of caution lights and morning sun. She tied it around her waist, adjusting the knot with careful fingers. In the mirror, she saw more than just herself. She saw her grandfather's quiet strength, her grandmother's unwavering faith, her community's collective courage. Back downstairs, the kitchen had nearly emptied. Bernice stood by the sink, washing coffee cups. She turned as Tasha entered, noting the belt with approval. "They tried to erase me," Tasha said, touching the yellow fabric. "Made me invisible in their clips, twisted everything I did, tried to burn away our gathering place." She squared her shoulders, feeling the belt's gentle pressure. "But this time, they can't erase me. were taking it all into the light. Morning dew still clung to the grass as volunteers set up folding chairs on the town green. The space transformed with each passing minute. Portable speakers appeared, handmade signs sprouted like flowers, and live stream equipment glinted in the strengthening sunlight. Mrs. Chen led a small group marking the demonstration area with bright yoga mats, while Mr. Washington directed veterans setting up a semicircle of seats for the elderly. Tasha stood back, watching the preparation. Her blue gi felt crisp and clean against her skin, the yellow belt a band of sunlight around her waist. Bernice adjusted Tasha's collar with gentle fingers, smoothing non-existent wrinkles. "Remember what your grandfather said about public spaces?" Bernice asked softly. "They belong to everyone," Tasha replied. "So they belong to truth." The crowd grew steadily. Church members arrived carrying water bottles and programs. Union workers showed up in their jackets, some still wearing work boots from early shifts. Seniors from the community center settled into the front rows, armed with paper fans against the warming day. Parents who'd had their own run-ins with the school's selective justice system stood in clusters, comparing notes. Darla moved through the gathering, checking her phone and conferring with other reporters who'd arrived from neighboring towns. Each held copies of the press packet, thick with financial records, testimony transcripts, and time-stamped screenshots showing the careful editing of video evidence. 5 minutes, Reverend Miller called out. She stood near the temporary podium, sorting papers with practiced calm. Behind her, a large screen had been set up to display video evidence. Tasha took deep breaths, centering herself as she'd learned in countless practice sessions. The grass felt springy beneath her bare feet. She thought of all the times she'd been told to make herself smaller, to take up less space, to accept whatever treatment others decided she deserved. Not today. The crowd hushed as Reverend Miller stepped to the podium. "We gather today," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the green, "to witness truth in the open air." Tasha moved to her position on the demonstration mat. In the distance, she noticed Principal Eldridge hovering at the edge of the crowd, trying to look authoritative, but clearly unsure of her ground in this public space. Officer Redding stood near his patrol car, arms crossed. "First," Darla took the microphone, "we'll show you what really happened that day in the dojo, with full context." She nodded to the tech volunteer, and the screen lit up with multiple synchronized video angles. "Watch carefully." The footage played in slow motion. Chad's initial taunts clear in the audio, his aggressive shove visible from 3 angles. Tasha's careful attempts to walk away captured in perfect detail. The crowd murmured as they watched the truth unfold unedited. As the videos played, Tasha began her demonstration. Each movement precise and measured, she showed exactly how she'd defended herself. Mrs. Chen called out the technical terms: a simple redirect of aggressive energy, a basic wrist control, a safety-focused takedown using the attacker's own momentum. Veterans in the crowd nodded approvingly at the efficient, non-showy techniques. Parents leaned forward, seeing how different reality was from the manipulated narrative they'd been fed. "Now," Darla continued, "we'll show you what happened after. The systematic attempt to bury truth." New documents appeared on screen. Emails between Coach Dwyer and Principal Eldridge. Financial records showing the dojo's preferential contracts. Testimony from past victims of similar incidents. Movement at the edge of the crowd drew attention. Ethan Klein walked forward, pale but determined. His black belt was conspicuously absent, his GI pristine white. Chad, standing with his father near the back, called out, "Don't you dare!" But Ethan continued forward. Taking the offered microphone, his voice shook slightly. "I need to tell the truth," he said. "Chad ordered us to target Tasha that day. Said we needed content for social media. Said she needed to learn her place." He swallowed hard. "Coach Dwyer knew about it. Told us to handle things internally whenever anyone complained about us. The crowd's shocked whispers grew louder. Principal Eldridge started forward, but stopped as cameras swung her way. Coach Dwyer's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "There's more," Ethan continued. "Officer Redding told us what to write in our witness statements. Said to focus on Tasha's aggression and leave out everything else. The school board." He paused, gathering courage. "They knew about other incidents. We were told our scholarships depended on maintaining the dojo's reputation." Phones throughout the crowd suddenly buzzed and chimed with notifications. Darla checked her screen, a smile breaking across her face. "The State Attorney General's office has just confirmed receipt of our civil rights complaint," she announced. "They're opening a formal investigation into discriminatory practices and systemic cover-ups in our school district." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Elderly church members waved their fans in triumph. Union workers whistled through their teeth. Parents hugged their children. Tasha stood in the center of it all, yellow belt catching the morning sun, her GI moving gently in the breeze. She thought of her grandfather's ledger, of all the careful notes about standing firm when truth needed defenders. She thought of every student who'd ever been told to stay quiet, to accept injustice, to let bullies hide behind power. The truth was here now, in the open air, impossible to erase or edit or hide behind closed doors. Whatever came next, that fact wouldn't change. They had moved the room, just as Grandpa Levon had taught. They had brought the light. Principal Eldridge strode onto the green, her heels sinking slightly into the damp grass. Her navy blazer and perfectly coiffed hair seemed out of place among the crowd's casual attire and protest signs. "This unauthorized gathering must disperse immediately," she announced, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. The crowd shifted, murmuring, but didn't move. Tasha remained centered on her demonstration mat, yellow belt steady around her waist, as Bernice squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. Mrs. Thompson, the town clerk, emerged from the crowd. Her sensible shoes and cardigan carried the weight of 30 years in public service. "Actually, Principal Eldridge," she said, unfolding an official document, "I approved their permit myself yesterday afternoon. This is a properly registered public assembly in a designated forum space." Eldridge's face flushed. "But the school board has no jurisdiction over the town green," Mrs. Thompson finished firmly. She adjusted her reading glasses. "Would you like to see the permit? Everything's in order, including the audio equipment variants." As if on cue, phones throughout the crowd buzzed with notifications. Darla's exposé had just gone live on the Meadowville Ledger's website. People hunched over their screens, gasping as they scrolled through the damning evidence. "Look at this email chain," someone called out. Eldridge told Coach Dwyer to handle the previous complaints internally. "The metadata timestamps," another voice added. "They prove when the video was edited. They cut out the first 30 seconds. Darla stepped forward, holding up her tablet. "Principal Eldridge, would you care to comment on these documents? Specifically, the ones showing how complaints about the black belt students mysteriously disappeared after their parents made donations." The crowd pressed closer, phones recording Eldridge's reaction. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. No words came out. More gasps rippled through the gathering as people reached a particular section of the article. "The donor ledger," a parent said loudly. "Coach Dwyer received school funds for safety partnerships, while student complaints vanished. It's all here. Dates, amounts, corresponding disciplinary records that were purged." Coach Dwyer stood at the edge of the green, still in his pristine white GI and black belt, looking increasingly isolated as parents drew their children away from him. His usual commanding presence seemed to shrink with each new revelation. "My daughter reported harassment last year," a mother called out. "You told me she was misinterpreting things. My son quit the dojo after Chad and his friends, another parent started. We have the receipts now, Reverend Miller's voice cut through the growing chorus. Every incident, every cover-up, every penny exchanged. Movement near Coach Dwyer drew everyone's attention. One of his senior students, a teenager with 10 years of training, slowly untied his black belt. The black fabric whispered as it slid free of his GI. Without a word, the student walked to where Dwyer stood and dropped the belt at his former teacher's feet. The soft thump seemed to echo across the suddenly silent green. Another student followed, then another. Black belts fell like dark rain around Dwyer's feet. Each hollow impact marked another loss of trust, another rejection of his corrupted authority. This isn't what martial arts should be, one student said, voice breaking. You taught us about honor, but you didn't live it. Eldridge tried one last time to assert control. This is a deliberate attempt to damage reputations. No, Tasha spoke up, her clear voice carrying across the green. This is truth finding its way into the light, like water finding its path downhill. You can't stop it anymore. The crowd began to move, a slow rhythm building. We see you, someone called out. Others took up the chant. We see you! We see you! The words swelled, becoming a wave of accountability washing over the green. Parents, students, workers, elders, all voices joined together, bearing witness to years of buried injustice finally exposed. Eldridge's perfect posture crumbled. Her shoulders sagged as she backed away from the podium, her heels leaving small divots in the grass. The carefully maintained facade of authority dissolved under the weight of revealed truth. Coach Dwyer stood frozen, surrounded by discarded black belts, symbols of respect and achievement transformed into accusations at his feet. His white GI, usually a mark of his position, now seemed to highlight his isolation against the colorful crowd of united community members. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the dewy grass. Signs swayed in the gentle breeze. Truth isn't disorder, and 5 seconds don't erase months. The live stream numbers kept climbing as more people tuned in to witness the moment justice broke through the surface of power's carefully maintained illusions. Tasha remained at the center of it all, her yellow belt a band of light against her blue GI. She thought of her grandfather's ledger, of his patient documentation of truth, of his belief that justice would eventually find its way if people stayed strong enough to make space for it. The chant continued to pulse through the crowd. We see you! We see you! Each repetition stripped away another layer of pretense, another year of covered tracks, another false narrative carefully constructed to protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. Dwyer's head finally bowed, the proud set of his shoulders collapsing under the weight of exposed truth. His hand moved to his own black belt, fingers tracing the fabric that no longer carried the meaning it once had. Sunlight streamed through the fellowship hall's new windows, casting warm rectangles across freshly painted walls. The smell of pizza mingled with drying paint and sawdust as volunteers put finishing touches on the renovated space. Bernice Rivers stood near the entrance, passing out paper plates and napkins, her face glowing with satisfaction. Looking good, isn't it? Mr. Jackson, a retired carpenter who'd led the rebuilding effort, stepped back to admire the refinished hardwood floor. Better than before, if you ask me. Tasha helped arrange folding chairs along the walls, each one donated by a different family in the community. Some bore small brass plates with names, silent testimonies to the unity that had emerged from conflict. The union folks really came through with the electrical work, Reverend Miller said, testing a new light switch. Everything up to code, and then some. The rebuild had become a symbol of community healing. after the disciplinary hearings concluded and the truth prevailed. People wanted to do more than just witness justice. They wanted to build something lasting from it. News clippings covered one bulletin board, telling the story of accountability. Coach Dwyer's suspension pending investigation into financial misconduct. Principal Eldridge's hasty early retirement announcement. Officer Redding's reassignment to desk duty while Internal Affairs reviewed his conduct. Chad's lost scholarship opportunities after multiple universities withdrew their offers. But more important were the changes that followed. The school board, under intense public pressure, had passed new oversight requirements. Every disciplinary action now required review by a community panel. Anonymous reporting systems were established. Training programs on bias and accountability became mandatory for all staff. "Remember when they tried to make this place feel small?" Bernice asked, watching Tasha arrange practice mats for the afternoon's class. Now, look at it. The fellowship hall had doubled as a meeting space during the rebuilding, hosting everything from youth groups to senior citizen coffee hours. Today would mark its official reopening, starting with Tasha's first free community self-defense class. People began filtering in, carrying water bottles and wearing comfortable clothes. There were grandmothers in tracksuits, middle school kids in t-shirts, parents with young children. No pristine white GIs or rigid hierarchies, just neighbors ready to learn. "You nervous?" Bernice asked, helping Tasha set up 3 orange traffic cones at the front of the room. Tasha adjusted her yellow belt, still proud against her blue GI. "Not anymore," she said. "These people know the real story. They were part of writing it." The choir members arrived early, settling into chairs along the back wall. They'd been practicing a special arrangement of "We Shall Not Be Moved" for the occasion. Ms. Dorothy, the choir director, gave Tasha an encouraging wink. Darla Perez slipped in quietly with her notebook, now a familiar presence at community events. Her coverage of the dojo incident had earned her a promotion and regular column focused on local accountability journalism. "Mind if I observe?" she asked. "You helped make this possible," Tasha replied. "You belong here as much as anyone." The room filled quickly. Some faces Tasha recognized from the town green protest. Others were new, drawn by word of mouth about a different kind of martial arts class, one focused on dignity rather than dominance. Reverend Miller stepped forward to welcome everyone. "This space," she said, gesturing to the rebuilt walls, "represents more than just repairs. It represents our commitment to each other. When they tried to silence truth with fear, we answered with unity. When they closed doors, we built new ones." Tasha moved to the center of the practice area, her yellow belt catching the sunlight. "Self-defense isn't about showing off or hurting others," she began. "It's about knowing your worth and protecting it. My grandfather taught me that before he passed." She pointed to the 3 orange cones. "These represent the obstacles we face, not just bullies, but the systems that protect them. The key isn't force, it's wisdom, patience, community." A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the crowd. Everyone understood what those 3 cones symbolized: Chad, Brett, and Ethan, now cautionary tales about accountability. "First lesson," Tasha continued, demonstrating a simple stance. "Balance comes from knowing where you stand, not just physically, but in your heart." The class mirrored her movement. Elderly couples held each other steady. Parents guided small children. Teenagers who once watched viral videos of the dojo incident now watched Tasha with respect, not mockery. Second lesson: we're stronger together. Tasha paired people up, teaching basic partner exercises. Notice how supporting each other makes both people more stable? The choir began to hum softly, the familiar melody of "We Shall Not Be Moved," providing a gentle rhythm for the movements. The sound filled the rebuilt space like a blessing. Bernice watched from near the entrance, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She could almost see Levon's spirit in the room, in the way Tasha carried herself, in the quiet strength that had nothing to prove, but everything to protect. "We moved the room," Tasha whispered, catching her grandmother's eye. The words carried the weight of victory, not just over bullies in a dojo, but over the machinery of silence and privilege that had protected them. The afternoon light softened, casting long shadows through the new windows. The choir's harmony wrapped around the practicing figures like a shield. In this moment, justice wasn't just an idea or a hope. It was as real as the rebuilt walls, as tangible as the yellow belt around Tasha's waist, as true as the community moving together in steady, determined rhythm. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day!